I'm Beatrix. When I was 6, my father drove me to a gas station in the middle of nowhere, and just left. No goodbye, no turning back. I waited all night, thinking it was my fault. Turns out, that was only the beginning. My family didn't just abandon me, they erased me. From their home, from their memories, even from the family will. They said I was unstable, that I didn't belong. But what if the truth was never about me, but about what they were trying to hide? What kind of mother pays to make her child disappear? And why? After all these years, are they still afraid of my name? People talk about the moment their life changed like it's some big, dramatic event. A car crash, a diagnosis, a wedding gone wrong. But mine? Mine was quiet. I was 6 years old when my father pulled off the road and left me at a gas station in the middle of nowhere. No fireworks, no yelling, just the sound of tires on gravel and a door that never opened again. I still remember the smell in that car, old leather, stale coffee, and something else I couldn't place back then. Something like finality. He didn't say much during that drive, just hummed along to some dusty country song on the radio and nodded when I pointed out shapes in the clouds. I thought he was tired, or maybe he had something on his mind. What 6-year-old thinks, "This is the last time I'll see my dad?" When we pulled into Elmridge, I didn't even know the town's name. It was winter. The sky looked bruised, like it was holding back snow, and the gas station he chose felt ancient, like it had been forgotten by time. He parked near the edge, engine still running, and turned to me with a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Hey, sweetheart, I need you to do me a favor, all right?" I nodded, eager to please, always eager to please. "Go inside and grab us 2 hot chocolates. I'll be right here." "I'll be right here." I held on to those 4 words like a blanket. It didn't even occur to me not to trust him. I slipped out of the car, sneakers crunching over frozen dirt, and pushed open the glass door that jingled like an old wind chime. The man behind the counter looked like he'd been carved from stone. Barely glanced at me when I asked for the drinks. I remember the cup was too hot in my hands, and I kept switching back and forth as I waited for Dad to come through the door. 10 minutes passed, then 30, then an hour. At some point, the guy behind the counter asked if I was okay. I lied and said yes. After all, Dad said he'd be right back. I just had to be patient. 2 hours later, I stepped outside and saw only an empty spot where the car had been. No tire marks, no note, just silence and that sinking, cold realization that something was horribly wrong. A police cruiser showed up around dusk. I don't even remember who called them. Maybe the gas station guy finally decided I wasn't just some lost kid waiting for a parent in a long line. The officers tried calling my mother. I watched them whisper to each other, their eyes flicking toward me, like I was some problem they didn't want to deal with. She said, "She doesn't want custody." One of them finally told the other, not knowing I could hear. Not custody. Not me. They used words like abandoned and orphaned, words I had only ever heard in Disney movies. And just like that, my life went from a regular Tuesday to a case number. The next morning, Ruthin came. She was my dad's older sister. I'd only met her twice before, and both times she'd worn too much perfume and looked like she was trying hard not to stay long. This time, she looked like someone had smacked her across the face with bad news. "I didn't even know she was in town," she mumbled to the officer. Then her eyes met mine. She hesitated, then crouched down. "Hi, Beatrix. I guess it's you and me now." It was only years later, after the damage had already soaked into my bones, that I learned about the envelope. A week before that road trip, Dad had received something in the mail. A manila envelope he refused to open in front of Mom. Ruthin found it stuffed in a drawer months later, unopened but clearly tampered with. Inside? A DNA test. You know how people say family isn't about blood? They usually mean it in a good way. But in my case, it was a curse. That test was the excuse he needed. Maybe he'd always suspected I wasn't his. Maybe the timing didn't add up. Maybe Mom had told him something that broke him inside. Whatever the reason, he didn't confront. He didn't ask. He just drove. As a kid, I thought I must have done something, gotten a grade wrong, forgotten to brush my teeth, spilled juice on the carpet one too many times. I spent years trying to earn back a place I didn't even know I'd lost. But what hurt more than being left behind was learning I was never supposed to exist at all. I used to think that being left behind was the worst thing a parent could do to their child. But being forgotten, erased, cuts deeper. It doesn't leave bruises. It leaves blank spaces where love should have been. Ruthin didn't have much. Her bookstore smelled like paper, dust, and cinnamon gum. It was the only thing she inherited from her late husband, and most of the time, she seemed more overwhelmed than nurturing. Still, she cleared out the cramped storage room in the back and told me I could stay there as long as I needed. As long as I needed. The same way you tell someone you'll call them later, knowing you won't. She bought me a tiny pink lamp from a garage sale and placed it beside the mattress she'd laid out on crates. That lamp glowed like hope, but I kept my suitcase zipped for weeks. A part of me didn't believe this was permanent. Another part prayed it wasn't. School started a month later. Ruthin walked me there on my first day, holding my hand like she was trying to convince herself she had this under control. I could feel her palm sweating against mine. At school, I didn't speak much. Kids asked where my parents were. I told them I lived in a bookstore. Some looked at me like I was lying. Others asked if I'd been in jail. One boy whispered, "She's the one they left at the gas station." And that rumor stuck harder than glue. Even teachers treated me differently. One of them called me sweetheart in that voice adults use when they think you're broken. Another kept pulling me aside, saying things like, "Are you okay, Beatrix? You know you can talk to us." But I didn't want to talk. I just wanted to disappear, or at least become someone no one noticed. Then, one rainy afternoon, Ruthin called me into the front of the store. Her eyes were darting like she was reading through something she didn't want me to see. She handed me a manila envelope. "This is from your mother's lawyer," she said, voice tight. Inside were the court documents. Celeste Fenn, my mother, in the legal sense, had signed away all parental rights. My name wasn't just crossed out, it was missing. Entire lines had been rewritten, like I'd never been there to begin with. "I didn't want you to see that," Ruthin muttered, trying to take it back. But I held it tighter. It didn't feel like losing something. It felt like being erased with intention. Later that night, I overheard Ruthin on the phone, whispering behind the stacks of hardcovers. "They told me not to talk about her, said it's better for everyone if she just fades out. Like she was a phase. A phase." That word hit harder than any slap. Years later, when I was old enough to open bank mail without asking, I found a strange statement in Ruthin's drawer. A quiet transfer had been made from Fenn and Maddox, LLP, to her account. A large amount. Dated around the time I moved in. When I asked her about it, her face dropped. "I didn't take it for me," she said quickly. "Your mother offered, no, demanded, that I take it if I was going to keep you. It wasn't hush money, I swear. I couldn't afford to feed you, Beatrix." The worst part? I believed her, and still, it stung. What was I? A responsibility someone got paid to carry? A monthly expense? Was I a child or just a transaction? I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I went to the back room, opened the drawer of the little pink lamp, and took out my notebook. I flipped past the pages of doodles and copied homework until I reached a blank page. With a dull pencil, I wrote one sentence and underlined it 3 times. Beatrix Fenn. No matter what they say. That night, I whispered it over and over, like a prayer to whatever God might still be listening. Because if they were going to spend their lives pretending I didn't exist, then I would spend mine proving I did. I didn't know it then, but I wasn't the only one being broken from the inside. I hadn't heard from Kian in over a decade, not since the day I watched his face from across a courtroom lobby as he held our mother's hand and turned his back to me. We didn't speak that day. We didn't even look each other in the eye, and I told myself it was better that way. So when his message appeared on my phone one night, "Do you ever think about them?" My breath caught like I'd stepped off a ledge. Them. My fingers hovered above the screen. Half of me wanted to delete it. The other half wanted to say yes. Every damn day. Instead, I stared at the blinking cursor. I thought of the journal under my bed, with my name written over and over like a lifeline. I thought of how many nights I'd wondered if Kian ever asked about me. If he remembered we were made from the same house, even if I was the one they burned down. Eventually, I replied, "Sometimes. Why?" He didn't answer right away. Kian had always been the favorite. The golden boy. The one who made honor roll, smiled on cue, and never left a single sock on the floor. Celeste used to introduce him at dinner parties, like a trophy she could take credit for. And yet, behind that perfect fen facade, something had started to shift. What I didn't know then, but he would later tell me, was that it began with a locked drawer in our father's office. Kian had been looking for a phone charger, of all things, a stupid little wire, but the drawer wouldn't budge. Curiosity got the better of him. He found the key taped under the desk, exactly where Magnus used to hide Christmas presents. Inside, instead of electronics or old tax forms, he found a thin file stamped confidential in red. He told me he almost didn't open it, that he stared at my name typed in bold letters across the top and felt his stomach twist. The report inside was clinical, emotionless. Terms like emotionally volatile, resistant to authority, and attachment issues were used like bullets on a page. I was 5 years old when that file was written. Why did they keep this? He asked me later. Why would they save something like that unless it meant something to them? I didn't have the heart to tell him I already knew. That file was their justification, their proof that I wasn't fit to be loved. And now, it was breaking him too. He started playing piano again. Secretly, quietly, only late at night, when the house was asleep. Not the classical crap our mother forced him into, but raw, dissonant chords. His own sound. He told me the music was the only thing that didn't feel like a lie. Then, one night, my phone lit up again. It was a voice note. I tapped play, and his voice came through, shaky but steady. "I think I understand now. And I'm sorry. I should have asked questions. I should have found you sooner. I didn't know how to be anything other than what they made me. But I think I'm ready now. If you are?" I sat on the floor of my office at the counseling center, knees pulled to my chest, replaying the message 5 times. 10. I closed my eyes and heard us as kids, chasing each other down the hallway. Before the silence. Before the divide. I typed one word and hit send. Coffee? I didn't know what I expected. Maybe he'd say no. Maybe this was a glitch in our timeline, and it would collapse again the second I hoped. But he replied almost instantly. "Name the place." So I did. A quiet little diner near the edge of Elmridge, the kind with cracked booths and burnt coffee, where the past didn't matter and no one asked questions. The next morning, we sat across from each other for the first time in 22 years. He looked older, of course, but tired in a way that didn't belong to youth. "You ever wonder if they just made us up?" he asked, stirring his coffee with a chipped spoon. I laughed, but it wasn't funny. "All the time," I said. "We didn't talk about the report, not that day. We didn't need to. It was there between us, thick as fog. What mattered wasn't the file. It was the fracture it left in him. The mirror he'd been forced to hold up and realize. Perfection had a cost, and neither of us was prepared for what we'd uncover next." Kian and I sat in the booth long after the coffee had gone cold. The silence between us was no longer sharp. It was heavy, but bearable. He fidgeted with a sugar packet while I traced circles on the rim of my mug. "I don't know who I am without them," he said quietly. I let that sit for a second before replying, "Maybe that's the best part." He gave a sad smile, but didn't argue. I wanted to ask him about the file, if he believed it, if it changed how he saw me. But I didn't. Not yet. That day wasn't about dragging ghosts out into daylight. It was about recognizing that we both had them. After we said goodbye, I walked back to the bookstore with a strange ache in my chest. Not pain, not quite. More like the shifting weight of something long buried starting to stir. Ruthin was in the attic, digging through boxes for a community donation drive. I offered to help, partly out of guilt, partly out of restlessness. Most of it was junk. Old Christmas lights, paperback romances with yellowed pages, a broken lamp that had survived 3 moves. Then I spotted a metal folder shoved between 2 crates of outdated tax files. It was labeled in faded black marker, Fen, private. I knew better than to ignore something like that. Inside were papers, neatly clipped. Most were bland, property records, old bills. But near the bottom was a thick envelope, sealed with a wax stamp. My hands shook as I opened it. It was a copy of my grandfather's will. Not the version I'd seen referenced in the news or court summaries years ago. This one named 2 heirs, Beatrix Fen. Me. I sat down hard on the attic floor, breath catching in my throat. Ruthin peeked over the edge of a box. "What is it?" I handed her the paper. Her eyes widened. God! I forgot this even existed. "You forgot?" My voice cracked. "Years ago," she said, almost in a whisper. "Celeste came by, said she was cleaning out some of the family records, asked if I had anything left over from your grandfather. I didn't remember this file. I thought it was just tax junk." "Why didn't you check?" My voice rose. "I didn't think she'd lie to me," Ruthin said, her face pale. "I didn't think." But she had. Of course she had. Celeste never asked questions without motive, and she'd clearly intended to erase any trace of me, legally, financially, historically. That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid awake replaying every moment I'd spent believing I was invisible, unwanted, a fluke. But this proved I wasn't just forgotten. I was eliminated. I pulled out the will again and reread the line with my name. It was right there. Black ink on aged paper. They didn't just throw me away. I whispered to no one. They buried me. The shame I'd carried for years, wondering what was wrong with me, why I couldn't be loved, morphed into something else. Not rage, not yet, but power. I wasn't broken. I was buried. There's a difference. The next morning, I called an old friend who'd gone into estate law. I didn't give her details, just asked a simple question. Hypothetically, what happens if someone illegally suppresses a legal heir? She paused, then said, "Depends." "But it's serious, like felony serious." I thanked her and hung up. My hands were steady as I filed the will into a locked drawer in my desk at the counseling center. Then I stood in the doorway, staring into the warm, quiet space I'd built for other people to heal. "They tried to erase me," I said aloud, to the books, the carpet, the silence. "Now let's see who they really are when the masks fall off." I didn't need revenge. I needed the truth to breathe. The folder hadn't left my desk since the night I found it. Sometimes I'd open it just to see my name on that page again, like I was making sure it was still real, still mine. But staring at truth and using it were 2 very different things. So I met with Serena, a former classmate turned estate lawyer. We sat across from each other in a booth at the only decent cafe in Elmridge, her laptop glowing between us and a stack of legal pads cluttering the table. She flipped through the scanned copy of the will, her brow furrowed. "It's valid," she said finally. "Your grandfather never signed a revocation or amendment. Unless they can produce one, this document holds weight." "And if they buried it on purpose?" "That's fraud, Beatrix. It's serious. But the second you act on this, publicly or legally, you're opening a door that won't close again. Are you sure?" I didn't answer. Not yet. Back at my office, I sat down with pen and paper, not a keyboard. I wanted the weight of every word I wrote to be felt. By me, by her. I wasn't angry, not in that moment. Just done being quiet. The letter was calm, measured, no threats, no accusations, just truth laid out like a chessboard. Celeste, I have come across a version of the will that names me as co-heir. It was not revoked. I understand what this means. I have no interest in a war, but if forced, I will defend my right to exist. I ask for discretion and resolution. Silence will not protect you anymore. Beatrix. I sent it through Serena's office using a bonded courier. Within 24 hours, I got a call from Ruthin. You sent it? She asked. Yes. She exhaled hard into the phone. You're brave. But listen. Celeste doesn't respond to polite. She responds to threat. That's not who I am, I told her. But it's who she is. 3 days passed. Nothing. On the 4th morning, I found Keon waiting on the front steps of my center, hoodie pulled up, duffel bag beside him. He looked like he hadn't slept. I'm leaving, he said. I blinked. What happened? She found out I helped you, said I was jeopardizing the family name. He laughed bitterly. Dad just sat there, polishing his glasses like we were talking about the weather. You don't have to do this, I said quietly. Yes, I do, he replied. They don't own me either. I wanted to say I was proud of him. I wanted to hug him. But all I could manage was to take his bag and bring him inside. That night, while he slept in the spare room, I checked my email. One new message. No sender name, no subject. Just a single sentence in the body. They're prepping a media campaign. You'll be the bitter illegitimate. Be ready. I didn't know who sent it. I didn't care. I stood up, walked out into the chill of the Elmridge night, and stared up at the moon. They think dragging me into the spotlight will break me, I whispered. Then I smiled. Tight, small, but real. They don't know what I've had to survive just to stand here. And just like that, they turned me into a headline. I woke up to my face staring back at me from a news alert. There it was, cropped from a photo I hadn't even known was taken. Me standing in front of the counseling center, arms crossed, tired eyes, hair pulled back on a windy day. Underneath it, the headline in bold, Estranged Daughter and Disoriented Son, the Fenn Family's Quiet Struggle. I clicked before I could even breathe. The article was glossy, clinical, designed to look balanced, but bleeding manipulation between every line. It painted me as a troubled, bitter outsider, estranged for years due to emotional volatility and unresolved personal issues. It described Kean as recently experiencing a mental health crisis and under close psychiatric review, citing an unnamed family source. There was no source. There was just Celeste. I dropped my phone. It clattered to the floor, screen still lit. Beatrix! Kean's voice echoed through the house. He stormed in from the guest room, his face pale and jaw clenched. He held his phone up like it was burning him. They said I'm in a facility. They're telling people I'm unstable, that I relapsed. You were never diagnosed with anything, I said, standing up. They don't care, he spat. She's telling people I broke down, that you triggered it, that I'm confused, too fragile to be taken seriously. She said I needed professional intervention. His hands shook. I haven't cried in 10 years, B. I think I'm about to now. I put my hand on his shoulder. You won't cry, not now, not over them. You're going to fight. He looked at me like he didn't know how. I'll help you, I promised, but we can't hide anymore. I reached out to a journalist named Emery Langston, someone I'd met through a client, someone who didn't work for clicks, but for clarity. Emery agreed to meet in person, no cameras, no tricks, just my voice, my truth. I sat across from her in the back of the bookstore. Kean stayed nearby, out of frame, but within reach. Emery placed a recorder between us and said, "Speak when you're ready." So I did. I told her about the attic, the will, the letter, the silence. I told her how Celeste tried to scrub me from existence, like a redacted footnote in her perfect narrative. I spoke about shame, about growing up in the absence of answers, about how they taught Kian to see me as a shadow. I didn't raise my voice once. I didn't insult them. But I told the truth. The story ran within 48 hours. Online first, then syndicated. It hit a nerve. Comments poured in from strangers who recognized their own families in mine. Survivors of silence. Children of image-obsessed households. Adults who had once been erased. "You're not crazy," one anonymous message read. "We saw what they did. We all did. We just didn't say anything." Old family staff, a former nanny, even a former colleague of Magnus's who admitted he never looked anyone in the eye when your name came up. For once, I wasn't alone. The next morning, I posted the original will on my center's website. No fanfare, no hashtags. Just a clean PDF and one line typed in bold above it. You can't erase what was written in truth. It wasn't about inheritance. It never had been. It was about reclaiming the name they tried to bury. About giving people like me permission to stop apologizing for being born unwanted. But Celeste never played fair. And her next move was the dirtiest yet. The envelope was thick, stamped with gold lettering, and hand-delivered by a man who didn't bother hiding his discomfort. I didn't even have to open it to know. Celeste had finally shown her teeth. Inside, a formal summons. Celeste Fenn versus Beatrix Fenn, charges. Defamation. Breach of privacy. Fraudulent claim to inheritance. Attached was a demand for immediate removal of my name from all references to the will. They alleged I'd forged the document, manipulated public perception, and caused irreparable harm to the Fenn family's legacy. I laughed. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was textbook Celeste. She couldn't destroy the truth, so she'd try to bury it under legal jargon and PR tactics. She wasn't trying to win in court. She was trying to exhaust me, drown me in paperwork and headlines until I backed down. But she had no idea how far I'd already crawled just to stand this tall. That night, as I sat in the glow of my desk lamp, another memory surfaced, one I hadn't touched in years. I was 6, hiding behind the tall staircase at the Missoula house, my knees pressed to the floor, holding my breath, trying to be invisible. I heard my father say, "We can't carry this forever, Celeste. It'll ruin everything." And her reply, calm and cold, "Then we cut the rot before it spreads." Back then, I didn't understand. Now, I did. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was damage control. And here they were, doing it all over again. The next morning, Kian knocked on my door. He looked tired, but clear-eyed. He held up a folder. "I filed an affidavit," he said. My throat tightened. "You did what?" "I wrote down everything. How they handled you, how they used me, how Mom made me believe you were dangerous. I called her what she is, a woman more invested in image than truth." He set the file on the counter and stepped back. If they're going to lie under oath, I won't stand next to them. When we walked into the Missoula courthouse that Friday morning, the air was thick with cameras and whispers. Sketch artists, reporters. Half of them didn't know who I was last month. Now I was the daughter who won't stay quiet. Celeste arrived in a pristine cream suit, hair perfect, expression blank. She didn't look at me. Good. I sat at the petitioner's table. My hands didn't shake. When it was my turn, I stood. The room was dead quiet. "I'm not here to reclaim money," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not even here to punish. I'm here because when I was 6, I was thrown away. Now I'm being told I was never meant to belong in the first place. If being erased was their goal, then I'm standing here to prove I survived it." I sat back down. I didn't need applause. I needed the silence that followed. The next day, the internet exploded. Courtroom sketches of me facing down Celeste circulated like wildfire. Articles with titles like "The Daughter They Couldn't Silence" and "Family Erasure is Real, One Woman's Fight for Identity" trended nationally. I got emails from strangers, survivors, former staff. One woman, a retired housekeeper, who used to work for the Fenns, simply wrote, "We knew. We all knew. I'm sorry." But I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. Because the court wasn't the only place Celeste planned to fight, and she had one last card left to play. The room was too quiet, one of those soundproof conference spaces that made every breath feel louder than it should. Fluorescent lights buzzed softly above my head, and across from me, Celeste sat perfectly composed in a beige suit and pearl earrings, like nothing about this moment threatened her. But her eyes were different. There was no fire in them, no smugness, just calculation. Cold, clipped calculation. Her lawyer slid the document across the table toward me. It was crisp, freshly printed. I didn't even need to read it. "Sign this," Celeste said, voice smooth as glass. "You withdraw your claim to the will, issue a formal statement of closure, and I make all of this disappear." I stared at the pen she'd placed beside the folder. Neatly aligned. A final attempt at control, dressed as generosity. "And if I don't?" I asked. She tilted her head. "Then you continue down this exhausting path. Court. Press your little supporters, eventually move on. The spotlight fades. You're left holding a name no one will care about." She said it like a warning. I heard it as a promise. I didn't move. I didn't touch the pen. Instead, I let myself drift. Just for a moment. Back to that night. 6 years old. The gas station's flickering lights. My legs numb from cold. My hands shaking as I waited. My voice cracked from saying the same thing over and over. "Please come back." I hadn't realized until this moment that I wasn't speaking to him anymore. I was speaking to me. To the little girl I used to be. The one who needed someone, anyone, to tell her she mattered. Present-day me closed my eyes. For the first time, I whispered it back. "I'm here." I opened my eyes and looked directly at Celeste. "I'm not here for your money," I said. "I'm not here for your legacy. I'm here because you tried to erase me, and I want my name back." Her jaw clenched, but she said nothing. "I was erased from your family portrait, your estate plans, your memory, but not from reality. I exist, I survived, and you don't get to silence me again." I pushed the paper back across the table, untouched. Celeste flinched. Not visibly, but I saw it in her fingers. The tiny tremble she couldn't suppress. For the first time, she didn't look like a woman in charge. She looked cornered. 2 days later, the judge ruled in my favor. The will was upheld. I was legally reinstated as a rightful heir. Celeste's claims were dismissed. There was no jail time, no dramatic courtroom fall from grace. She left through a back exit, her lawyer shielding her from cameras. But she lost something she couldn't buy back. Her version of the story. And for a woman like Celeste, that was the real punishment. That night, I stood outside Haven House, the porch light casting long shadows across the street. I held a mug of tea in both hands, warm against the December air. Snow fell in lazy flurries around me. I closed my eyes and whispered. Not to her, not to the world, but to the little girl inside me, still waiting outside that gas station. You survived. You were never crazy. And they don't get to write your ending. I won the fight. But healing, that would take a different kind of strength. The headlines faded faster than I expected. One week, I was front-page material. Estranged daughter reclaims her name. And the next, I was just another story buried beneath the next scandal, the next outrage. I didn't miss the noise. Haven House returned to its rhythm. Kids laughing down the hallway, paint-smudged hands during art therapy, mismatched shoes piled by the music room door. People smiled when they passed me. Some hugged me. Others called me inspiring. I thanked them all, but inside I felt quiet. Not empty. Not exactly. Just still. It turns out winning doesn't put the pieces back. It doesn't unweight the hours I sat in the cold outside that gas station. It doesn't pull back the years of silence, of doubt, of shame. It just ends the war. Celeste never showed her face again. No press conferences, no interviews, no public rebuttal. She didn't even issue a formal apology. She didn't need to. People knew. That was enough. Kian cut contact, moved into a small apartment near the edge of town, and started teaching music therapy at Haven House. We worked in the same building most days, and sometimes we'd share lunch. But we didn't talk about her, not anymore. We just lived. I got used to the quiet, learned to enjoy the mundane, grocery shopping with Ruthin on Saturdays, early walks before the kids arrived, the smell of vanilla candles mixed with poster paint and hot cocoa in the winter. I stopped waiting for justice. I started looking for peace. One night in early January, I found a letter in the back of my closet. It was written in my handwriting, years old. Folded, worn, unsent. It was addressed to Celeste, page after page of questions. Why did you leave me? Why didn't you stop him? Why did you hate me for existing? I read it once, then again. Then I fed it into the fireplace. The paper curled and blackened, its edges crumbling before the flames even touched the ink. And just like that, I let it go. Some answers, I decided, don't matter anymore. A few days later, I walked past the gas station. The same one, same cracked concrete, same tired signage buzzing faintly under the morning sky. I hadn't been back since the night everything shattered. I was going to keep walking. Then I saw her. A little girl, no more than 6, sitting on the curb beside a rusty pump, arms wrapped around her knees. Alone. My breath caught in my throat. I walked over slowly, heart pounding, voice tight. "Hey, sweetie, are you okay?" She looked up. Big brown eyes, flushed cheeks. "I'm waiting for my mom. She just went inside." And sure enough, a woman stepped out of the convenience store a few seconds later, calling her name. The girl smiled and ran to her without a second glance. I stood there, watching. And then I cried. Not out of pain, not out of anger, but because something inside me finally let go. The little girl who had once waited alone wasn't waiting anymore. She had me now. Not every wound disappears, but some become maps, showing us how to walk away and never return. I used to believe that survival was about staying invisible, about not causing waves, not asking questions, not needing more than I was given. But I've learned something. Silence doesn't protect you. It only protects the people who benefit from your silence. If you've ever been made to feel like you didn't belong, even in your own family, let me say this to you. You do. You matter. Not because someone else says so, not because you're perfect, but because you are here. And no one gets to rewrite your story but you. In life, we don't always get apologies. We don't always get justice wrapped up in a bow. But we can choose peace. We can choose growth. We can choose to stop bleeding for people who never even tried to stop the cut. If this story made you feel something, if it reminded you of a truth you've been carrying, or a lie you're tired of living under, don't just scroll past. Let's talk. Tell me, what would you say to your younger self if you could go back? Drop a comment below. If this story touched your heart, leave a 1 or let me know where you're watching from. If it made you uncomfortable, I'd still love to hear why. Maybe that's where the healing starts. And hey, if you made it this far, you're part of this community now, so don't miss what's next. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you won't miss the next story that might just speak to your soul. Because sometimes a stranger's story helps us finally understand our own.